Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 12th special meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item tonight is going to be to further our Council deliberations, and before I ask Ms. Lovegrove to start with the presentation, there's a few comments I would like to make to members of Council and to the audience. As I said at the last meeting, we're not under any obligation to come to a decision this evening. There's more time. There'll be more meetings. Although I do hope tonight that we certainly will get moving along things that we want to do and things that we don't want to do. I want to also remind Council that this budget says the 2016-2020 draft provisional plan. Every year there's an opportunity for a great deal of revision. In terms of the absolute drop-dead deadline for adopting a budget is May of 2016. I'm not saying we should wait that long, but I'm just saying that if there are questions and more questions, we have the time. The other thing I'd like to point out is that aside from the fact that it's still a provisional budget, the staff have been looking at the long-term capital plan, the 20-year long-term capital plan, and that plan has been revised upwards by approximately $10 million over the next 20 years, because there have been items where they've been recosted, and this is why every year we do discuss issues of the budget. The other thing that I'd like to say before we begin is that when we look at 4.5%, I asked staff to bring that down into dollars and cents in terms of what it means to the average taxpayer. So the taxpayer that has a home roughly in the $296,000 range, their annual taxes would be increased by $57.42. And by somebody that owns a home in the $4,000 range, their annual tax increase would be $77.50. So I just thought I'd point that out. So without any further ado, Ms. Lovegrove, would you please, I think there's been some minor revisions, and as I said, Council, I hope that tonight we can say yes or no to certain things and bring up some. I know I've got a couple of things that I'd like to bring to Council's attention. So Ms. Lovegrove, would you please start?
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight there is no presentation. Tonight we're just opening it up to Council to let us know what they like, what they don't like, and if there's any changes, any revisions. We have made 2 revisions, but we have not.
Okay. Do you want to ask a question now? Okay, continue.
We have made 2 revisions, but we have not updated the model yet. We are holding them until any other changes come out of this meeting, and then we'll bring them back to Council. The 2 revisions we have changed are we have removed the $50,000 for the CAO recruitment, and we also found a duplicate entry in the fire department, and for $14,500, and we have removed that as well. The fire department casual assistant was duplicated in the budget, so it has been made singular now.
So you've got some slides you're going to show us?
No.
You don't have any slides?
Nothing.
So it's pretty much everything stays the same with the exceptions. I'm sorry, that you just noted. Excuse me. All right, Council, let's go around the table to see what we'd like to do here and make some decisions tonight. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. It might come as a surprise, but I will not be supporting the 4.5% increase. Over this past week across the country, the news media have been all over municipalities for out-of-control spending. Less than 1% of municipalities over the last 10 years in BC have kept operating spending at or below population or inflation. Parksville is not one of them. The 4.5% increase in the budget has nothing to do with the raising taxes last year by only 1.5%. The increase this year doesn't cover the cost of the wish list for operations of $510,220. I have little trouble raising taxes for infrastructure, but we can't continue to raise operating costs at the present rate. This idea of raising taxes and operating costs over inflation and population growth is not sustainable. I think we failed to see since 2008 the economy has not rebounded and has slowed in the last couple of years. Growth is expected to be no more than 1%. Our payrolls since 2010 have increased, I believe, 36%, while our population growth has only increased 5.6%. However, I would like to make a motion to start the work on a Jensen Extension. And this is a little bit of good news, I think. This project is on the books for 2017. However, I would like to see some money brought forward to have the engineering and planning done in 2016. So this project can be shovel-ready and completed in 2017. We could put some of this operating money aside for this purpose. The Jensen Extension is an important part of our road work if we are to have anything done with 19A to make it more people-friendly, slow the traffic, and include parking and new business. We had 4 great plans drawn up for 19A in 2008, and unfortunately, after the presentation at the United Church, went sideways. Due to a poor presentation, this project was held up. It is time, for the sake of the downtown revitalization plan, that this project get done. Nothing can happen on 19A until the extension is completed. So I'd like to make a motion to forward that Jensen Extension, possibly around 250,000, bring it forward so that we can do the engineering, planning, and so on this year in 2016, so that it can be shovel-ready for 2017.
That's a motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Beale. Further discussion from members of council. Councillor Oates?
Do I understand this is to be funded from cuts from the operating budget?
There is enough money in the budget in 2017 to cover this. However, we might need that extra money come 2017, so any cuts that we make could go towards that. I have no trouble putting money into infrastructure, raising taxes for infrastructure, but I have trouble every year when we come with such a cost for working. Thanks.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Beale.
So quick math would say we're looking at a 6.5% increase to fund that then?
No, that's not. I believe there is money that could be brought forward in the budget to cover that cost.
If I may, Your Worship, the full project is currently budgeted in 2017. So what we would be doing is reducing the 2017 budget by 250,000 and moving that forward into 2016. Over the 5-year period, 2016 through 2020, it will make absolutely no difference. Whether it's a year ahead or not, it won't affect the budget at all.
Yes, Councillor Oates.
So if I'm clear then, if we approve this, we could still go ahead. That would presume then that everything would be fine. We can do this, presuming a 4% tax increase in those future years.
Okay. Any further?
That's right.
Further comments? We prepared. I support this motion. I think it's. Pardon me. I'll just jump in here. I'm going to support the motion. I think that it's overdue, and I think it's important to Parksville's future that we have the key elements of a better use of traffic and better use of 19A in terms of the potential for that. So I'll go to Councillor Oates, and then I'll go to Councillor Beale.
So I've heard, since I've been here about how we got a good plan in place for our replacement and our infrastructure replacement. So I'm wondering what impact us as politicians making a change to that plan would have. As good as it sounds, I'm wondering if there's any concerns from the engineering department. It sounds like it's already a done deal to me, but I just heard about it a few minutes ago, so I'm wondering.
I'll go to Councillor Beale, and then do you have the same question? Okay. Does a member of the engineering department, Mr. Figueroa, do you want to make a...
If I may, Your Worship, through Councillor Oates. The master transportation plan that is we're going to be bringing to you early in the year next year. The preliminary results of that has prompted us to put it in 2017. So there's more emphasis on that. In terms of bringing forward $250,000 to cover engineering fees for that, certainly we would have to look to see what other project would need to be possibly delayed for a year in terms of trying to get enough room in there so our resources can cover this project. But I don't anticipate that delaying any project 1 year is really going to cause an issue for us. I can see us being able to do it. So what we would probably do, we do have money identified for the Corefield corridor design. We would probably combine that with the Jensen and try to come up with a project. There's an overlap. Obviously, those two roads intersect. So if we design one, we're going to have to at least partially design the other anyways. So we'll look for ways to try to push those together, and maybe that'll be enough of a saving so that we can, if they tackle those at the same time, there's a savings there. So.
Okay, Councillor Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I checked with the engineering department on this, and it was their feeling that it was a good idea to get this part done, the engineering and planning done, so that it would be shovel ready for 17. Otherwise, if you wait till 2017, probably we're going to end up with 2018 before it gets done. And I think this is a very pressing issue because we need something to happen on 19A and to revitalize the downtown. And without this Jensen Extension, we really can't do anything with 19A. Thank you.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also agree that putting in the Jensen Extension would certainly help the situation on 19A. And furthermore, the intersection at 19A and Corefield is an extremely busy one, and it seems to me, without collecting hard data, that it's gotten much busier over this past year. And I think that it would also alleviate that situation and allow us to do some interesting things for the whole city and for the downtown.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. Like Councillor Oates, this is the first I've heard about it was this evening. I would like more time to do my own research and talk to the engineers as well. I know that that's always been in the works, and we run up to a number of different obstacles throughout that process, including the presentation about one-way streets on Jensen and the highway. It was all up in the air. There was a big master plan, presentation at Knox United Church that Councillor Greer was referring to, and it did go sideways. But at the same time, this is it's been in the works for a long time. The master transportation plan will be finished early next year, and I think I would like to see that before I make any decisions on the Jensen Extension.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Salter and then Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would echo Councillor Powell's sentiments. I agree. I think we should wait, and I don't think we should be jumping into anything at this point. We do need time to review this, and this is news to me. I know that there was some hullabaloo when the presentation happened, and I know that there were some folks who weren't really agreeing with the Jensen Extension. I, at this point, don't know where people sit, so I'm not prepared to make a decision on behalf of the community when I don't really know how they feel about it, and I don't feel that I have enough information tonight to make such a decision. Thank you.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This motion has nothing to do basically with starting this project through to McVicker Street at this time. All it is the money up front to do the engineering and design work. That is all. So that when we are prepared in the 2017 budget to go ahead, it'll be shovel-ready, and we'll be able to do it in that year. Otherwise, it almost goes off to another year, and we put this off many years now. So all I'm asking for is the 220 or 250 to get the engineering and planning done in advance of 2017, because it is in the budget for 2017, and we do have basically the funds for it.
My recollection of discussions on this particular topic was that it does offer us, once the road is made to go through to the way it's supposed to go, that we would have a number of opportunities to, if nothing else, try some issues that are going to be beneficial to 19A, and those discussions have been going on not only with this council but with previous councils. So I don't see the need to not go ahead and do this. Councillor Oates.
I'd like to move referral back to staff for a report on the implications of moving this ahead in the budget.
Have I got a seconder? I thought I heard tonight that the staff said that this was doable by doing this. Okay. So, motion to refer. All those, do I need to vote on? Yeah. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. When could? Yeah, motion's defeated. Could staff provide that while we're still having these deliberations?
If I may, Your Worship, as I said earlier, the full amount for the Jensen Extension is included in 2017. Moving $250,000 forward to 2016 will have zero to or little to no effect whatsoever on the 5-year budget. All of the funds are already there. You're just moving it from one year to another. It'll have basically no effect.
So what we need to hear from staff is the viability and that sort of thing, and feasibility. Okay.
We just heard it. We just had it.
Okay, we'll wait for an update from staff. Okay, what I'd like, yes, CAO.
If I may, Your Worship, there's still a motion. Councillor Greer made a motion that the $250,000 be moved from 2017 to 2015. That still has to be voted on.
Okay, so we had a mover and we had a seconder for that motion. Any further discussion on that motion? Councillor Oates.
Right now, I'm going to vote no for it, and I feel like I might be making a mistake because it sounds like it's. Here's my problem. I've come into this told that we have a good plan in place for respect to replacement of our infrastructure. Everything is all tickety-boo. We just got to follow the plan, and now we're being asked to alter the plan. And so that if that's okay, then I got to question the entire plan, I guess. That's the dilemma that I'm having here right now, and I really hate to hold this up and have a tie vote and have it defeated, and delay a project that may be very, very worthwhile for the community, and it might be something that we should be doing. However, I'm in a position here where the only thing I know for sure that I've heard everybody around this table talk about, and I heard our staff talk about for sure, was how good our plan was. I was at a water meeting the other day where I heard our director of operations say one of the reasons he came here was because we had such a good infrastructure plan in place. And I think that's a good place to be. But to come in and now to change that plan on a motion from, like if this came from staff, no disrespect to Councillor Greer, if this came from staff, I wouldn't be having this, but this sounds like a good idea to motion to come up from one of the councillors here. And if I were the only person that expressed this sentiment tonight, I probably wouldn't be expressing it, but I hear that other people are feeling the same way. So I'm going to have to vote no because I believe in the plan.
But if you listen to the CAO, what the CAO said is it has no impact on the plan. I'll let the CAO
If I may,
articulate
Your
that better
Worship,
than I can.
oftentimes in the past, we have budgeted the full amount of a project in a year, and as has been brought to our attention and Council's attention, the engineering work is usually done in the first year. The actual project is done in the second year. So with this, Councillor Greer is right. If we started this in 2017, the physical works would likely be done in 2018. In looking at it in conjunction with the work that's scheduled to be done at on Corfield right now, as the Director of Engineering mentioned, there is the possibilities for some synergies in working the two of them together. The Corfield-Jensen intersection obviously is an important intersection. If we can do the engineering of that in conjunction with the Corfield project and the Jensen project, there is actually some savings in doing that. So it could be beneficial to move this forward, or at least the $250,000 forward, to allow the engineering works for the Jensen and Corfield to be done together.
Thank you. Councillor Salter, Councillor Beal.
So I appreciate that information from Mr. Manson. You know, I would like to hear the numbers. So I would like to hear you put something together and bring it to us and present it, and then let us look at it. This is this is just new. It's right off the top. We're here going over a budget, which I'm sure we've all looked at, and here we are suddenly moving something forward by a couple of years. Maybe it's a great idea, but I would like to see a little more information coming at this point. If we defeat it tonight, it's not over. It can be brought forward again, and we can. But I would like to see. I'd like to lay it on the table until we've gotten through the budget. And once we're through the budget, we could take another look at it and maybe give staff time to bring something to us.
Councillor Beal.
That's a motion. That's a motion. Laying it on the table, that's a motion.
Councillor Beal, go ahead. You're just making a comment about that. You're not.
No.
We have a motion on the floor that we're discussing now. Yes.
If I may, Your Worship, Councillor Salter is making motion to defer this, laying it on the table. So in effect, she now needs a seconder, and then you can vote on that motion.
I didn't hear the word defer. So do I have a seconder for that motion? By Councillor Salter. Okay, so all those in favor of deferring this?
Is there discussion permitted on that motion? Can I just make a point of information? If we vote no to this, we're right back to where we started again. If we vote yes to this, I think you're giving council the opportunity to leave their options open. If we vote no, similar to when we voted for a motion to refer, you're tying our hands and you're going to get a no vote again. So I'd encourage you to vote yes to this so that that option remains open to council.
Any further comments? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. What I'd like to do now, members of council, you've all had a chance to look at the budget. You had a lot of detail. I wanted to go and look at the, what happened to the lights? I wanted to go and look at the budget adjustments that are on page 5. Any comments on the expenditures on page 5? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. It's mostly about the diversification grant. I see we get that in 2016 and 2017. It's for the PCCC. Is that for the roof?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, the roof is part of it, but there are other projects that are included in there as well. I believe it's painting, interior and exterior as well.
And so as we're doing a renovation on the roof as part of the grants, is there a possibility to install solar panels or put it up so you can later install solar panels? Has that been brought forward? And do we know, I think we had a discussion about that at one time. Maybe the CAO remembers that discussion.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell. Doing the electrical work, I guess, to make it solar ready is something that we could definitely look at. We have done, on an ongoing basis, reviews of the cost effectiveness of installing solar panels on various buildings throughout the city. The technology right now is such that you have about a 25-year payback in your investment, which is way too long for the amount of money that you would be investing. We would suggest that the actual solar power or solar panel portion of it be delayed until such time as it's much more cost effective. When it gets down to the 10-15 year basis is when it would likely make more sense. But as far as wiring is concerned, if it's practical to do that at this time, we can certainly look at that as part of the renovations.
And I gather that the cost of solar panels are going down as we speak.
If I may, Your Worship, yes, they are. We're hoping that they'll come down within the next 5 years so that instead of a 25-year payback, they'll be in the 10 or 15, which would mean that you've gained 10 years of your investment just by waiting 5 years.
Plus paying less money for solar panels, yes, okay. I want to come back, yes, Councillor, can I just come back? Let's get things back under control a bit here. We're still on page 5. If you look at the CAO succession plan, that is no longer a factor. So what about the other items? We've all had a chance to look at that. What about the other items on page 5? You've got the admin training, the HR training, the health and wellness initiatives, the miscellaneous labor consultations, the training for in-house insights facilitator, and unused vacation payout for retiring fire chief. Councillor Powell, on those items.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question about the miscellaneous labor consultations. That's again in the next page, and we're also hiring HR advisor. So we're going to spend $30,000 on miscellaneous labor consultations, and then the request is for an HR advisor for $90,000. Couldn't the HR person, aren't we duplicating? I'm on the front page. It says miscellaneous labor consultations.
Page 5.
And yes, and the next page has, and then we're looking for a HR advisor. And so aren't we duplicating? Would we still need that position if we had an HR advisor?
If I may, Your Worship, the HR advisor that Councillor Powell is referring to is actually something that's put in the budget plan for 2018. So it's still, in essence, I guess 2 additional budget deliberations away before it's fact. The miscellaneous labor consultation is more of a contingency to allow us the resources when we end up with significant issues, investigations, arbitrations, whatever. That's what that is intended for.
Any further comments on the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items under succession plan on page 5? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for that miscellaneous, though, is there a reason that we don't call it legal contingency? Sorry.
If I may, Your Worship, I missed that.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering through the mayor, so for the $15,000, I'm wondering, is there a reason why we don't call it legal contingency rather than miscellaneous?
We can certainly call it contingency.
And then it would just be used simply for that purpose rather than, yeah?
The reason it's not called legal contingency is because, for the most part, it wasn't lawyers that we were using for this. It was our EFAP program and their consultants. So it wasn't technically legal. So it's just consulting is what it is rather than legal. So that was the reason why it's called that rather than legal.
Follow up?
I actually, because you're asking about what's on page 5, I do have questions about the items on page 5. So I don't know how do you want to do this? Do you want me just to go through them, or do you want to sort of?
On page 5, go ahead.
Okay. 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 So, sorry. The 5,000 training for the in-house insights facilitator. So I'm wondering, for that, is that in addition to the health and wellness person for 6,000?
Can you answer that?
What's the difference between the two? What's the difference between the health and wellness initiatives person and the training for the in-house insights facilitator? What's the difference?
They're two entirely different animals. One is literally health and wellness for the employees. The other one is a facilitated, how do I describe it? I guess management tool to enable the productivity of employees through good relations amongst employees, I guess is the best way of putting it. It's a management tool to enhance the productivity of employees.
Okay. How do you, can you give me an example of how you're enhancing by using this money?
By taking away employee conflicts so that they're working together in a congenial and productive way as opposed to human arguments.
Follow-up, I'm still not, how are you doing that though? What are you doing? What are you spending the money on to make that change?
Through a facilitated program, working through all departments to take away conflict.
So you're paying for a facilitator with those dollars? Is that what you're saying?
What we're looking at with this particular item is to train an in-house facilitator so we don't have to use consultants. We can do it with existing city staff.
Okay, so we're going to train in-house to now do the facilitator. And so up until now, we've been paying outside facilitators to come in and do this?
To a certain extent, yes.
All right. Well, thank you for that. That explains
Follow-up?
that. For another one. So for the 5.2 admin training for the Solder Business School, we're just wondering who is it for and what does the city gain by that? Like, do we not already have that?
Mr. Manson.
I would have to check who this is for. I have a feeling that I know who it's for, but I don't want to say until I know for sure. So I'd have to get back to you. And in essence, it's to, again, increase staff's ability.
Because when we... Sorry.
Somebody has been designated. That's what you're saying. Okay.
This is for one person.
This is for one person.
This is to pay for one person to go to the Solder Business School.
To take courses through the Solder Business School, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on this one? Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering if there could be some additional information about the Occupational Health and Safety Master's Program. Can you just explain? That's at $10,000?
Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, the Director of Human Resources, Operational Health and Safety has requested $10,000 for her to take her master's program for HR. That's what this is.
Further questions? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is this common practice for the taxpayers to pay for somebody taking a master's program?
If I may, Your Worship, yes. It is something that's done in local governments.
So they've always done that?
I wouldn't say it's always been done, but it is something that is done by local governments. There is precedent in the past in the city of Parksville where the city has paid for employees to take master's program. I can think of, off the top of my head, the two previous CAOs to me, both were funded to take their master's program, and I know others have as well.
Thank you.
Okay, no repetition. You've got something new to say? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so number one, I'm wondering how it is that taxpayers are paying for someone to get their master's. And second of all, I'm wondering, do you have anything in place for this person once they've completed their master's that they're going to remain working for the city for X number of years, or is there something in place with that, or do they just get their master's and once they have it, can they move on? What does that look like?
Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, yes, we actually have a council policy that has been approved by council that outlines exactly what you're just saying. I believe it's policy 7.3, but I could be mistaken. I'll certainly find out which one it is and forward it to council.
Further questions?
Sorry, do we know how long they're expected to remain working? Like, I know with other employers, people have to remain working for them for, I think it's 3 years.
If I may, Your Worship, within the policy there are stipulations that indicate that if an employee leaves employment of the city within a certain amount of period or a certain amount of time after receiving training, that they would repay portions of that depending upon their time. What those are off the top of my head, I don't know, but it is outlined in the training policy, as I said, which I believe is 7.3, and I will make that available to council. What's in the policy manual, I'll make sure that you know exactly which policy it is.
Okay. Are we prepared to, can I have a motion after this thorough discussion on those items: admin training, HR training, health and wellness, miscellaneous labor consultation, training for in-house insights, facilitator, and unused vacation payout? Can I have a motion that those be accepted? Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. I want to direct your attention, Council. Yes, Councillor.
What's the effect of passing that motion?
The effect of passing that motion is it'll be in the budget for 2016. Okay, I want to go back to page 4, if you'll allow me for a moment, Council. We have, in operating, we have $50,000 for the Community Park Master Plan Review. We have $18,000 for the Fire Department Succession Planning, and $16,000 Engineering Summer Student from 2016 to 2020. Page 4. Future year spending package 2016 for the Community Park Master Plan, $18,000 for the Fire Department Succession Planning, and an Engineering Summer Student at $16,000 for 2016 to 2020. Does anyone have any questions on this? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only one that I have a question on is the $50,000 for the Community Park Master Plan review. I believe we had one done 8-10 years ago, and to my knowledge, the park hasn't changed any. And I think at that time it was $40,000 that we spent, and now we're going to spend another $50,000 to redo that plan. I don't know what we would see in it that would be that much different for $50,000. So I asked the CAO that question.
Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, it was done 10 years ago, and the cost of the plan at that time was $30,000. This is a direct result of a request that was made to council from the Beach Fest Society with regards to, I believe, the World Volleyball Championships. Oh, sand sculpting, I'm sorry. Anyway, it was in regards to a request from Beach Fest, which would, in essence, increase the area necessary to hold that event, significantly reducing the existing kite field. Because of that, it is staff's belief that the community park master plan should be reviewed again to see what, I guess, the community's desires for the future of that park is. That's what this would be directed towards.
Yes, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Probably the first decision we should be making whether we need to expand the sandcastles or not. That would be a question that we should have approved by this council. Do we really want to expand the sandcastles? It's a great idea, and I'm not saying I'm against it, but maybe that's a question. Maybe we don't need to expand it. On the other hand, if we are going to expand it, I don't know why we would need to have another master plan and spend $50,000 to give them another, whatever, quarter acre for a sand pit. So I think we've got enough very smart people that work for the city. I'm sure they could figure that out without going to spend $50,000 for a master plan.
Mr. Manson?
If I may, Your Worship, whether or not you're prepared to, I guess, make the changes to the park for the sand sculpting, that's something for council to decide. To have an update of the community park master plan done gives the ability to get input from the community. We can tell you at the staff level what we think should be done from an objective professional opinion point of view, but that isn't getting input from the community. This would provide that tool to get that input, and then council can make a decision as to what they want to do.
And you have to admit that the park is extremely stressed the way it is now. So, Councillor Greer, once again.
If we just want the community input, could we not present them with a couple of plans from the city and just advertise it and say, give us your ideas? I mean, that's how we would do it in a master plan situation anyways, so we could have input from the community. I mean, I think we could do it ourselves and come up with lots of good ideas and then present it to the taxpayers and see whether they're in favor of it.
Mr. Manson, have you got any comments to that?
It's just a case of resources. It's not quite as simple as Councillor Greer says. We can simply send something out and get the input back. Somebody has to compile that. Somebody has to do the plans to start with. So it's a case of resources.
So I guess, Councillor Greer, if we were to do this and do it the way that you're proposing, it could take a long time. Councillor Beal, then Councillor Salter, then Councillor Owens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Regarding the community park master plan, just a comment, my recollection may be off, but I thought that the original request had something to do with the going after the World Volleyball and that it wasn't Beach Fest, but perhaps there were both. Okay. I actually was curious as well about the fire department succession planning, and I just wondered if I could get more information as to what this would look like. Like, how does that? What is the $18,000 used for, and how would that play out?
If I may, Your Worship, I stand to be corrected by the chief. I believe it was for duplication of the chief to remain for a period while we had his replacement on staff at the same time for continuity.
Okay. Councillor Salter.
Thank you. So just back to the community master plan, though, I'm just wondering, so when you did the original, through the mayor, when we did the original master plan, though, do we require assent from the community for that master plan, or do we just vote on it as a council?
If I may, Your Worship, it's council's decision. Council, with anything, can get input from the public with regards to direction, but it is up to council what is chosen.
Okay. Follow-up?
And follow-up is, so when you say $50,000 for the cost to create, I guess, a new master plan, So I'm assuming that you've looked at the amount of staff that it's going to take and the amount of time it's going to take, and that will equal 50,000, or is it up to 50,000? What are we?
If I may, Your Worship, in essence, we would go out for request for proposal, outline what we're looking for, and we would get consultants to come back and tell us what they would charge to do this. The budget is 50,000. If somebody came back and could do the job for 15, we would take 15. It's up to 50,000.
Okay.
From my understanding, if we were not to do this, to go out to tender and get a consultant to do it, it's not on the books for staff to do, and if staff had to do it, it would take a long, long time. By a long time, I mean it wouldn't be done in the next year or two.
We don't have the resources right now, unless something else was to not be done. We don't have the resources to do this.
Okay. Any further questions on these three items?
I do.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you. So for the, no, not the fire department, sorry, the engineering student, I'm just wondering, what is that student doing? What are we getting for that? What work are they doing?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter. Having an engineering student does a number of things. It's mutually beneficial that we found to have them in our area. They bring a lot of energy into the hall. It's an opportunity for people to pass on what they know to a student, a potential student that's going to maybe even join us someday when they graduate. This, depending upon the student, the ones that we've had in there have been able to contribute quite a bit. In that they we're able to do things we wouldn't. Our day-to-day work doesn't allow us to do. They bring in a lot of energy and ideas that we include them in all of our meetings. We try to mentor them in terms of a career. We found that they've actually been quite productive for us and inject quite a bit of energy into our work. So.
We've had an engineering student for a number of years now. Yeah, summer student. Yes, Councillor Salter.
I thank you for that explanation, but really what I'm wondering is what specific jobs are assigned to them? You're saying they bring energy and ideas, but what are they? What ideas? They're attending meetings, you're mentoring them. You're saying they contribute and they do things that you can't, but what is it that they're contributing that you can't do that they're doing for you? And what is it that what specifically are they doing for the money that we're spending? What are they doing for the city?
Director of Engineering.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, I'll give an example. Is this particular student we've had this year? He's from Alberta via Kenya, and he's quite a bright person. He's been able to work with our GIS group, which Randy's a group. We have our GIS director. He's been able to work with him. We've been trying to improve our information in our GIS system. We've got, over time, our information is getting better and better, but he was doing field verifications of our GIS information, and he found quite a few improvements for us to make, which we have. So as of today, because of having our student, we've got much more accurate GIS information. He was mainly concentrating on our water system, but he's allowed us to do that. He's put a lot of energy into rolling out our information systems to the operations department, so now they're able to, and they're going to be able to in the field access as-built information. So he's helped quite a bit in improving our processes.
Thank you. Another question on this topic? Okay, a new question.
So it sounds like your GIS system, what is that? Is that a computer program?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, our GIS system is basically a database of all of our infrastructure, where it is, what kind of condition it is. It also works through a mapping platform so that we're able to actually pull up a map of where all of our infrastructure is, and we're able to click on objects in that map to pull up as-built information. So it's a mapping system.
Further questions on this, these three items for the future spending package in 2016? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just maybe explain the 18,000 for the succession planning. This means, I assume, when the chief retires, that he stays on for a period of time to help the new chief. And
that's what I heard.
So, is there any period of time that 18,000 covers? Does that cover 2 or 3 years, Doug? That you'll be.
I thought it was going to cover about a week. Is it a week or two, or?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, it would probably cover a couple months to, or up to a couple months for training to get the new positions for my replacement and or the, if somebody moves up, then training for that position as well. Just some overlap, so there's a smooth transition.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, are we ready to? Oh, Councillor Salter, yes, you have another question.
I do.
No repetition. It's new questions.
Who says? Sorry, through the mayor. My question with the 18,000 is, so we've known that Chief Banks would be retiring. So I'm wondering, has any other money been budgeted, or maybe it's not? Maybe it's too lucky. Has any money been budgeted for this succession planning for the fire department up until this year?
Mr. Manson saying no.
Your Worship,
so
through to Councillor Salter. There hasn't been any other money budgeted. Or actually, I'm incorrect in that. We did have something in last year's budget, but that was removed. And we just left the 18,000 in.
Okay. Did that answer your question?
Well, it does. I just do wonder, though, how it is that we didn't know he was going to leave, that we didn't budget for him.
Mr. Butterworth.
I believe this item was in the budget last year for 2016, so this is just bringing the 2016 items to your attention forward. So it was in last year's budget, but in the 2016 year. So these items here were already in there. It's just to bring them back to reaffirm that they should stay in the budget.
Okay, members of council, are we prepared to vote on the 50,000, 18,000, and 16,000? And if we are, can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any further discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Moving right along, I'd like to go to page 7, which is the new spending packages in the operating budget for 2016. And I guess we'll have to start with the hard one, which is the 88,600. Before I go around the table and ask for comments on that one, and we'll go down the list, I think that the CAOs all sent us some from the bylaw compliance department, the inquiry activities that have been going on. I think this year we're heading for probably 4,000. In 2014, we were at 3,316. At 2013, we were at 3,453. At 2012, we were at 3,512. And at 2011, we were at 3,047. So I'm going to start the discussion regarding the bylaw enforcement officer request. And who is going to go first? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I cannot support another bylaw enforcing officer unless we change the process and how we run that department. I believe on a couple of things that we have to change the way they operate the department by going more proactive, and the fines have to be given out higher than what they have been and more efficiently and quicker. This department loses a considerable amount of money. I think it's $34,000 they bring in, and it costs us $200,000 to run it. But we could hire another 2 or 3 bylaw enforcing officers, and unless we change the process, and the policy, then we're not going to gain anything from it. We can't just sit and take in calls. This sheet that was given to us, I looked it over well, and even from 2003, there's only one extra call going through to 2015. 2003 had 3453, and 2015 had 3454. So we only had one extra call. And the questions that I ask is,
I think Mr. Manson wants to make a comment here. Well, Mr. Manson wants to make a comment on what he's just said.
I just want to make a clarification. The 2015 number that you're comparing that to is only to the year-to-date, the end of October. You're comparing the end of October to all of 2014 or 2013. So 2015 is only for 10 months, not a full year.
Okay, that's fine. The other thing I would ask is, all of these calls, are they just telephone calls and they have somebody has a complaint, so they take the number and they maybe solve that problem on the phone? So it's not like we have to send people out to look at the situation. I'm sure many of the calls are answered in the office or on the telephone. So we have a staggering amount of numbers here, but I'm sure most of them are answered very quickly, either on the phone or over the counter. Anyways, beyond that, I really do think that the officers, and some of these also on this sheet, I'm assuming, is the guy that goes around once a week and give out tickets, parking tickets. He works under that department as well? So these are parking ticket accounts as well. But getting back to the bylaw enforcing officer, I think we should be proactive, and I think the fine should be much stiffer, and I think they also should be able to work flexible hours. I know at the present time they're union members, and the union will not allow them to work, but I think if we're going to have bylaw enforcement, we should have it at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock at night, and Saturdays and Sundays. And under the present condition, that's not happening. They work from whatever, 8 to 4, and they don't work weekends. And that doesn't solve many of these problems as far as I'm concerned. So unless we change the policy, I would not be in favor of hiring more bylaw enforcing officers.
Mr. Manson, do you want to comment on that?
If I may, Your Worship, the policy as to how the bylaw compliance is run right now is a council directive.
Looking at those
Council
again.
has directed us to work on a complaint basis. We don't go looking for them. That isn't the direction that we've been given by Council. If Council wants to change that direction, change the direction and tell us to start being more proactive. With regards to the hours of work, it is certainly our intention, if another bylaw compliance officer is authorized, to move heaven and earth as much as we can to have this person available to us on the weekends. Whether we can extend that to 6 till 6, again, if that's Council's direction, we can certainly look at trying to achieve that as well. But it's up to Council to give us direction.
Can I just follow up?
Follow up quickly, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, as the Mayor stated, we're going to look at these policies and so on. So could we put this off until we come up with a new policy and how we operate this department?
I guess what you probably should do is tentatively, or at least in principle, authorize this for the budget until such time as you can come to some conclusion with regards to policy. If you take this out and you increase the requirements of bylaw compliance, then you're going to have to put it back in again, and whatever ramifications that would have at a later date. So I would suggest to Council that at least tentatively it remain until such time as you come to some conclusion with regards to the way bylaw compliance will be resolved.
Yeah, I have no trouble with another bylaw enforcing officer as long as we can change the policy so that they're working the hours that are requested to work. And so that's my only problem with that situation. The other question I might ask is, Ms. Coleman said at our last budget meeting that our bylaw enforcing officers were going in early in the morning to clear out the parks. But I didn't ask the question at the time, did they get paid overtime or did they get time off for that?
I believe, Your Worship, and you're going to get me in trouble with the union, they came in early and left early.
Okay, that explains that.
As we continue this discussion, I want to remind Council that one of the things that's coming up in my discussions with Dr. Hasselbeck of Island Health is that the provincial government is in the process of third reading with regarding no smoking bylaws that are going to be put forward. And we're one of the few cities that have waited to see what that bylaw looks like so that we can have something that's got some teeth in it. So that's another bylaw we'll be passing. We heard the comment from the students this summer that we're doing the monitoring in the park and cigarette butts all over the place, which was new to me. So I guess smoking in the park is an issue. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so I agree with some of the comments that Councillor Greer made. You should mark that down now.
Yeah, good.
And I think that part of it is that Council has directed how we do the bylaw enforcement, but I think too part of that, the process is the way it is because we are so short-staffed and they're not always able to get out there when they need to. And I strongly support, there's nothing that irritates me more than we have all these bylaws and we have the fines attached to those bylaws and we don't enforce them. And so we don't get that money that we could be making to offset the cost of a bylaw officer. And so I would really like to see that change. And as well as Councillor Greer, I would like to see them down working on weekends because that's when a lot of the stuff happens. I see your finger up there,
especially in the summertime.
Especially in the summertime. And so, I support it so long as we change the process and we also look at the hours of work.
Who's next? Who's had their hand up? Councillor Salter.
Fred wants to say
something.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just have actually jotted something down here with bylaw. I put it beside bylaw enforcement, but I'm not sure if that's who it was, but it's $1,378, which was for extra park security. So I'm assuming that we paid someone those additional dollars for security in the park, and it could have just been maybe during an event, I don't know. But it was in the budget, and I put page 10, but I don't have that page with me. With that bylaw officer, would there also be a car involved with that?
Yes, Your Worship.
So,
through to Councillor Salter.
Thank you. And so it was suggested to me, actually, and I actually like the idea, was that perhaps rather than a car, they use, I don't know what they're called, it's like a moped, but it allows the bylaw officer to get into places that you wouldn't with a car. So they could travel on it's a bike with a motor on it, a motorized bike, I guess, and they can go down into the park, they can get in all the areas, they can go down on the boardwalk or whatever, but they can easily get around town. It's not that big of an area, and it would be an awful lot less expensive than a vehicle, which would be available, I suppose, if they needed it. I see the vehicles out there, but that would be a suggestion that I would make.
Mr. Manson?
Two comments. First, in regards to a comment by Councillor Powell. Again, Council's directive is that we deal with bylaw complaints or bylaw issues on a complaint basis. But it's also Council's directive that we go for compliance as opposed to punitive. So if Council wants to change that, again, that's a policy decision that Council will have to make. With regards to the acquisition of a moped, I think that's an excellent idea. However, I wouldn't want to be the person, for instance, that was running around the city on a day like today on a moped. During the summer months, I think it's something that would make sense, but not during the winter months. It's something possible or that we should maybe think of in addition to a car, but not instead of a car.
Okay, I believe it's Councillor Beal, and then Councillor Oates, did you have your hand up also? No? Councillor Beal and Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've just a little bit of clarification. I'm wondering how, correct me if I'm wrong, but right now we have 1.6 bylaw officers, in a sense. I understand that there's maybe a little flexibility in terms of how that part-time allotment is used. And so the proposal is to have one additional bylaw enforcement officer. And then in 2017, there would be an increase of 0.4, and so at that time we would actually move to three FTE equivalents. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, this is done in conjunction with the provincial emergency preparedness. I believe in the budget there's also provisions to move the provincial emergency preparedness coordinator to full-time. That position and this position would indeed move the bylaw compliance to 3 and the emergency preparedness coordinator to 1. So I believe you're correct. Did I get it right? The Director of Finance is nodding his head, so yes, I got it right.
I couldn't nod my head. I'm not the Director of Finance. Okay. Is that, you have a follow-up to that? Okay. Who's next? Councillor Oates?
Thank you, Your Worship. The proposals in the budget based on the policy remaining unchanged. Were we to change the policy, would one bylaw officer adequately address the increased need?
If I may, Your Worship, that is something that intuitively I would say no, because presumably if we're being proactive with compliance, we're going to have a lot more files to look at than is shown in these printouts right now. So yes, it would put more, I guess, or more pressure on the 3 bylaw compliance officers that we'd end up with if we're being more proactive and if we're dealing with this from a punitive as opposed to a compliance. Although, having said that, compliance, or trying to get compliance, is often much more time-consuming than simply giving somebody a ticket. Less accepted by the person that's getting the ticket, but again, that's something that Council should consider if they want to change the policy.
So just to resume what I've heard so far, and I'll get to you in a moment, Councillor Beal. Just to resume what I've heard so far, I get the impression around the table that Council's prepared to put this in abeyance, put it in a holding pattern. We'd sit down with the Director of Administrative Services, and we'd work on the looking at the bylaws, bylaw enforcement, more teeth in the bylaws, and make a decision as to whether or not we want to be compliant or punitive or whatever the case may be. Is that pretty much what I'm hearing around the table? Mr. Mason.
I think one of the things that Council has to decide amongst themselves, if you want to explore the costs and implications of going from a compliance or from a based on complaint versus proactive, and explore compliance versus ticketing, what the impacts would be. Some of that is information that staff can provide to you. Some of that, however, is subjective. For instance, how somebody would feel having somebody just simply give them a ticket versus trying to work with them to get to compliance. That's more of a subjective as opposed to objective. based on complaint versus proactive, that is something that we could comment on. So I think those discussions are something that council should have amongst themselves. Debate that issue first of all, and then once you've come to some sort of conclusion, then you can direct staff to provide you with input as to the expected consequences or costs of the decisions that you're thinking of making.
My looking around at other municipalities is that it's pretty much based on a complaint basis. I don't know too many municipalities that are very aggressive about it. Okay, Councillor Beal, Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a little add-on to what Mr. Manson was saying. I can appreciate that full proactive could be more time-consuming and therefore more costly. On the other hand, if we allow that possibility, there still could be priority for complaint-driven, but allow our bylaw enforcement officers to respond to a situation that they observe.
Councillor Oates.
I'm prepared to support the addition of an additional bylaw officer, whether if the policy stays the same. If we want to strengthen our policy, I think that's a discussion that deserves a lot more information than we have, whether we should be doing that or not. In which case, and we decided to do that, then I would support an additional bylaw officer over and above the one that we're being proposed here tonight. I think that there's the number one complaint in the last year has been with issues with bylaws, whether it be on the beach or on sightly premises or cigarette butts. I think we have a responsibility to respond to what the public are saying. These statistics are a pretty powerful document. I don't believe, everything I read in the paper, but there's an occasional letter in the paper about unsightly premises and things like that, and there is a concern about how bylaws are enforced. We're told that we don't have enough people. This is the second year in a row this item has been, well, to my knowledge at least, the second year that this item has been in front of us for consideration. So I'm prepared to support the addition of a new bylaw officer tonight, policy remaining unchanged.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just to clarify things, as I mentioned earlier, our payroll has increased 36%, and our population has only increased 5.6%. So we have a lot of static, I know, in the taxpayers who say that we're hiring more and more staff and it's costing more and more, and yet our population isn't growing very much. But just to get things straight here, we're looking at hiring a health and safety.
I'd like you to stick with the bylaw. Let's deal, because we start wandering all over the place. We'll be here all night.
This is part of it. We're hiring a health and safety person, which this council was not totally happy with. And my suggestion was we have a part-time bylaw enforcing officer that does emergency measures program. So I've asked the question, why couldn't we combine those two positions with one person, rather than have two people, one with health and safety, one with emergency measures? And then we could maybe afford a bylaw enforcing officer. But it seems like we're hiring 3 people now in the year 2016, and of course the other emergency coordinators in 2017, but that comes very quickly. But is there any possibility of doing that, having one person do those 2 jobs? Because we did talk about a part-time health and safety person, and we have a part-time emergency measures. If we combine those 2 jobs for one person, then I could certainly support probably a bylaw enforcing officer to replace the person that's there now.
Mr. Manson, you have any comments on that? And Councillor Greer, by the way, I said it at the beginning of the meeting, $57 a year and $77 a year, that's not out of control.
If I may, Your Worship, provincial or the duties and responsibilities of a provincial emergency preparedness coordinator and those of a bylaw compliance officer are totally different. If we could find such a person that had both of those skill sets, yes, we could combine them, but I think that that would be relatively difficult to find those skill sets in the same person.
Okay.
Just to follow up, thank you, Your Worship. The idea is not a bylaw enforcing officer. We have one chap now that does the emergency measures, and I'm thinking since we can send people for a master's degree and so on in their department, we could maybe train our man now that does the emergency measures into be a safety and health officer as well. Could we not train that person to do that job?
Mr. Manson?
Again, it would require somebody that had the desire to try and do two things, and I apologize, yes, it was the occupational health and safety officer and the provincial emergency preparedness coordinator that you're talking about. But again, they're two entirely different skill sets. Yes, people can be trained if it's something that they want to do to start with. So we would have to find an individual that would be prepared to do both jobs, and I would suggest that it would be relatively difficult to find that person.
It seems that both those positions are rather close, health and safety and emergency measures. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship, they're totally different. Totally different.
Okay. I believe Councillor Salter had her hand up, and then who? Did you have your hand up? Then Councillor Powell. Councillor Salter.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with Councillor Greer. Combining those two positions I think it's a really good fit, actually, a health and safety officer and emergency preparedness. In fact, occupational health and safety officers, at least provincially, have learned emergency preparedness in order to do that job. That's what happens when you have the in-house safety officers. So the training is done out of Victoria. It is not really expensive to do. And I think that would be a really good idea. And I also think that it's fiscally sensible for us to be doing something like that rather than hiring two absolutely different positions because there's a synergy there. That's that piece. The other is with regard to follow-up. Sorry.
Go ahead.
With regard to the bylaw officers, I'm wondering, we're talking about the need for now 3 bylaw officers, I think I'm hearing, and we're talking about, whether we're going to do this through just complaints coming in, or are we going to send them out and they're going to be kind of out there looking for people who are breaking laws, dogs running around. I'm wondering, though, can we get, when we do our review, can we get data that shows whether or not we're getting repeats, whether the same person is getting, we've given them the warning, and then it's the same person again, and now we're reaching a point where we're having to charge them, or is the warning working in the first place? Because I think that makes a big difference with regard to the bodies, the FTEs that we're going to require on the ground.
Mr. Manson?
Yes, Your Worship. Certainly we can provide extended data to this repeat individuals. And yes, there certainly are those. With regards to the occupational health and safety and the bylaw compliance, as I said earlier, they are two distinct skill sets. I'm your professional advisor. I get direction from staff with regards to this. It is my opinion and our opinion that it would be very difficult to get somebody with both skill sets.
Councillor Powell and Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Worship. I have to strongly disagree with both Councillor Greer and Councillor Salter. You can't have this position and pretend it's the same as each other. They both deal with different legislation. The Emergency Social Services is an outreaching service. It's within the community. It's within the province, and it's in case of a disaster. The Occupational Health and Safety is more to do with in-house, is to make sure that your employees are safe on the work site. They do connect with Emergency Social Services when there is a crisis, but other than that, that's the only time those two meet.
Councillor Oates.
I just want to clarify what this document is that I'm looking at here. This of all these numbers here are complaints that came to us as opposed to staff-initiated issues. These are each one of these numbers represents either someone coming to the counter here or picking up the phone and saying, I got an issue with X.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, that's correct.
And is this a comprehensive list of all our bylaws that, or just the ones that have been called in on?
If I may, Your Worship, these are inquiries with regards to bylaws, direct complaints with regards to bylaws, comments with regards to bylaws specifically to the individual criteria that's set up. There may be more bylaws that we regulate. If nobody has complained or brought an issue, it's not included on this list.
Thank you. Okay, Council, we're going. We've been on this for a little while. I've heard Councillor Oates talk about wanting to staff the bylaw enforcement officer. I've heard other comments about let's plan on staffing it, but let's have a look at some of the bylaw policies to see that if they couldn't be changed or refined a bit, so that there'd be a little more teeth for the bylaw officer to go after. What's your pleasure, Council? Does someone want to make a motion? Okay, Councillor Oates. It's all right. Well. And you're seconding that? Well, if this passes, the car's got to go. Let's keep it pure. Okay, so I've got a seconder in Councillor Powell. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Okay. Going down the list, I don't know how quickly we can do this because I want to get to the audience in a little while. Tempest e-commerce configuration, briefly $6,000. That is exactly...
It allows us to accept payments on virtually all city services as opposed to just taxes and utilities.
Any questions on this particular item? It seems fairly straightforward. Somebody want to make a motion that the Tempest e-commerce configuration?
I'll make it.
Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The part-time accountant. Would you like to enlighten us, Mr. Butterworth, on the part-time accountant?
Yes, Your Worship. This is in relation to getting some help, higher-level accounting help for 2 days a week, or basically a 40% FTE. Right now, we should be starting to implement an asset management plan. Between us and engineering, there really isn't any time to get moving on that project. We are going to be required to have that in the near future in order to get grants. So that's a fairly important project. The DCC update should probably be getting underway. We don't have the resources right now to start that project. That's put off till next year, and we're just going to have to make time for it. Public sector accounting bodies keeps coming up with accounting changes for us. Right now, I'm doing an evaluation of all the city's contaminated sites. That's taking quite a bit of my time to figure that out. We're mandated to do it, or else we will, the auditors will not approve our statements. Other policy research and updates, job procedure manuals go on the back burner because we get to them when we have time, which almost never seems to happen. Training other departments in our new systems. Pam works on that when she has time. It's sort of on the side of her desk. It's an important thing to make sure the other departments know how to use our software. She's very good at it, but we don't have a lot of time to do that. The sewer rates correction, I brought it to council, the previous council, to start moving the sewer treatment plant, which is collected. The rates for that are paid for by general taxes, and it really should be paid for by the sewer rate users. That's a big project to undertake, and put those onto the sewer rates as opposed to the general taxpayer. So there are a whole bunch of projects that we have that we want to get moving on, but we just don't have the resources to do them. We're just flooded in our day-to-day stuff. And you know, we have clerical who are getting by in their jobs, but as far as the accounting side, we need to be able to pass some stuff off Pam and my desk so we can work on some of these other things. So I'm looking for some part-time help so that we can start moving that direction.
Question from Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm exhausted after all that. I think you need 3 more people. However, I will agree on the $31,620. So I'll make that motion to cover that.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Beal. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Thank you. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items have to do with the fire department. I'm sorry. Yes, Councillor Oates.
I think the FD casual position's been removed, right? Yeah.
Starting with the parking lot lighting, the Class 3. I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Manson.
Time out. The fire department casual position is still on the table for discussion. The comment with that is that in the budget totals that we provided to you, it had been included twice. We're taking the second one out. The position is still there, but we're only accounting for it once.
So it's just, was it half of 14.5? No, it's the full 14.5. Okay. All right. So you weren't double charging. Okay. Okay, so it's back in, and we've got the parking lot lighting, the casual position, the 3 drivers licensing, the replacement of pavers, instructors conference, and standby pay. Do members of council have any questions on those items while the fire chief and assistant fire chief are here? Councillor Greer and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe the chief could give us another little bit of information on the standby pay. Was this, if I recall from the last meeting we had, this was for officers who are on 24-hour call on the weekends? Am I right on that?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, what it is a system of standby pay, if you will, for staff that are required to be on for 24 hours. Typically, staff, we're based on, the salaries are based on a 35-hour week. So there's 1,820 hours per year. Right now, staff are putting in an additional 2,300 hours per year on standby, over and above the regular workday. For example, this week, Assistant Chief High is he's the duty officer, so he's working his regular day shift, and then he's required to be on standby from after the workday is over until 8 o'clock the next morning to be able to respond. And then also during the weekends when we have a duty officer system set up, but presently between the 3 chief officers, we are on basically tied to town for the weekend as a resource for the volunteer officers to contact should they need further assistance and that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Salter, I believe you had a question.
Oh, yes, sorry, but it wasn't about...
Microphone, please.
Sorry, yes, but it wasn't about the fire department.
I'm only on the fire department items now.
Okay,
we're only talking that. Okay.
Well, I'm talking about the parking lot lighting.
Yes, well, go ahead. This is all the fire department items here.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about standby pay. So the parking lot lighting, is that the LED lighting that you were talking about?
Fire Chief.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, we would look at putting in LED lighting, whatever's going to be cost effective. Currently, there is no lighting in our parking lot area. And a night like tonight, where it's exceptionally dark, members are responding to the hall, and there's potential safety hazard for other vehicles are coming in as they're making their way into the hall and that. So there is no there is no lighting for the members, so it's basically a safety item.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Oates.
The fire department casual position and the fire department assistant that's budgeted for 2017, those are two separate and distinct positions, are they not?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, yes, they are. What we were looking at with the casual position, and really what it is, it's give us some ability to bring in some of our volunteers for special projects, whether it's equipment maintenance or different stuff like that, to let us get caught up on some items that we can't get done right now.
Councillor Salter.
So I just want to understand, how is it they can't do that when they're on standby then? Because I know that you guys aren't fighting fires every night, so what happens when you're on standby then, if we're approving that one?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, this would be to cover off the volunteers, and they are not on standby. This would bring them into the hall and allow them, give us the opportunity to reimburse them for their time that they're putting in getting things caught up.
Okay. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, the standby pay would be basically compensation for the time and limited limitations to people's lives while they are on standby. I understand that. Do many other municipalities or fire departments have a standby pay that we don't have right now?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Beale, I think it's kind of varied all over the place how different departments do things differently. This is sort of similar to what we have in place for current city staff that are on standby, carrying the pager, being able to respond. So,
follow up.
Thank you, Worship. And I'm just wondering how that standby pay, if it does, how it relates to the paid call system implementation, which is on the books proposed for 2017. Would one supersede the other, or in the case of standby, this is for officers, for paid members? Is there any overlap there, or are they completely separate amounts?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Beale, they're separate. The moving to the paid call system would change the way that we're reimbursing the members for their time.
I can tell you that at the RDN level, that the Justice Committee that I chair, the Victim Services Group has now asked for standby pay because, as Chief has pointed out, you've got a buzzer in your pocket and you're a prisoner. You can't go anywhere. You've got to be around because you're on standby, and that's usually several days at a time. Any questions on the fire department issues? Councillor Beale.
Sorry about that. Thank you. A very small, relatively small item, but I am curious about the replacement of the pavers. I gather these are somewhat specialized pavers and they haven't worked out that well. Will there be a plan for these to be sold or, available? Any sort of, I guess, recouping of any of the costs of these pavers? I have no idea how many there are.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Beale, that's probably something we can look at in the in the contract when we put it out there, if somebody wants to take them. What we have in place right now is grasscrete pavers that would allow the grass to grow up, but they're for us to do some training in those areas and that they're not working out. They're a bit of a safety hazard. We actually had one of our members fall, tripping over the curb, and he landed on the pavers, and his hand got caught and broke his hand, and he's actually he's since stepped down from the department, but he has a permanent disability through WorkSafe because of a bit of a loss of use in his hand.
Okay, are we prepared to vote, or Councillor Salter, you have a question?
Sorry, I just want to make sure that I've really got this straight in my head. So we've got the standby for folks who are basically having to remain in the city on standby with their pagers. So we're going to give them standby pay. So that's that one. So that's for, I guess, the officers, so that the volunteers can connect with them, or they're there in the case of an emergency. Is that right on that one? Yeah. And then the fire department full-time assistant, not sure that person is going to be upgrading the equipment or something in the office or in the fire department.
You were sure to Councillor Salter. Are you talking about the position for 2017 or the?
Yeah, the 84.
That is separate. That position will take on some more maintenance duties that would take over, allow the. I guess we're relying on the volunteers to do a lot of some of the equipment maintenance and stuff like that. It would also help us get on track with meeting our requirements for conducting life safety inspections that we're getting behind. There's a wide variety of duties that can do. Holiday relief gives us another member. Daytime responses are they're a tough one because a lot of the members are working during the day and not necessarily available to get away. So that would have another position for daytime responses, as well as a bit more for holiday relief. When we go away, we're down another body during the day for emergency response. Can assist with training, can assist with public education events. The more we can, have somebody in-house that can do that, it's taking a bit of a burden off the volunteers, and that gives them a little more time to be available for emergency response when we really need them.
And so just to follow up, to finish.
Follow up.
So, and then we've got the paid call system implementation, which I believe is for the volunteers, to give the volunteers incentive for.
That's correct. It would change the way we're compensating the members right now for emergency response and training.
The volunteers.
That's
so
correct.
The volunteers would get some kind of financial.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, the volunteers are being compensated. We have a system, what we call clothing allowance, and that's been in place forever, since before I joined. And it basically, we have a set amount of money that gets divided up amongst the members depending on the number of emergency calls and training events that they make. It's not in my mind, it's not really an equitable representation. That, like, for an emergency call, for example, last year I think we paid about $18, just over $18 a call. It didn't matter if the call was 5 minutes or 5 hours. it was the same set amount, and it didn't matter on the level of responsibility either. The new recruit was receiving the same level of compensation as the senior firefighter that would be in charge of a crew on a truck that has enormous responsibilities looking after the crew, you know, all the work safe stuff and everything. So we were looking at, we'd like to go to a system that is a bit more equitable for members, and you know, hopefully it can be a retention strategy as well.
Okay. Councillor Greer.
Just one question. Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, how many full-time firemen do we have now, and will this person add to that by one person? Yeah. How many full-time firemen?
Right now we have 3 career staff.
3?
Yeah, the 3 chief officers, and then this would be another additional position.
So you'd have 4 as of next year?
No, as of 2017.
Well, yeah,
The
17.
full-time position is
right,
for
2 years. Yeah.
No, that's correct.
Good, thanks.
Are we ready to vote, members of council, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items regarding the fire department? Can I have a motion that those items be approved? Moved by Councillor Powell. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greer. Any further comments? All those in favor? Thank you very much. I think we can move along fairly quickly at this stage. Drought management, I don't know, Mr. Squire, do you want to just give us a very brief overall presentation on the drought management package?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Drought management is partly being offset by the reduction in the snow and ice control program to the tune of $21,600. In other words, the snow and ice control program has been reduced by that amount. For us, it's certainly a different operational mode, and it allows us to man additional non-potable wells for use for fill-up stations, irrigation reprogramming, public education, advertising, and also to perform water audits and patrols.
Any questions for Mr. Squire? Councillor Salter.
So you're saying, sorry, this is for public consultation to teach the public what we're doing for snow and ice, a snow and ice program?
No, drought management is being offset. Part of the $30,000 is being offset. We've reduced the snow and ice control program by $21,600. And in doing so, we've brought forward a new budget called drought management. It's the inverse of snow and ice control for the summertime. If we're going to be experiencing climate change, such as drought conditions during the summer, it's something needed, very much like in the wintertime when we need snow and ice control.
Follow-up?
To do what? What are you going to do in the summer when there's no water? I mean, if we had reservoirs, we'd have water. We wouldn't need a drought program.
It's to do what we did this summer, where we had no budget to put our resources to. We had water fill-up stations of non-potable water. We also had to go out and do daily patrols. We also had to reprogram all our irrigation systems.
But do we not have that? I mean, we pay staff to do those things. So why would we now need an additional $30 when we're already paying staff their salaries to do that work?
It's the actual addition to the overall budget is $8,400.
Is $8,400?
It's a new identified budget for us to charge our time to.
But you get salaries, right?
Yes. So again, the budget is something this year when we were performing those works, there was no money. There's nothing to charge to. Like every for instance, if we're doing work in the parks or for mowing lawns, we charge to mowing lawns for Springwood. If we're doing works for drainage works, we charge it to the drainage sections. Each section has a different budget for it. This would provide us a budget for our resources to charge to and account for it accordingly.
So is the money already in the budget, and you're naming it the Drought Program?
I'm going to let Mr. Manson step in here. Go ahead, Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, in essence, the $30,000 that's being identified here as a cost center is being offset by, as I heard, $21,000 in reductions in other areas of the budget. Mm-hmm. So although this is a $30,000 cost center, the only increase is around $8,000.
Uh-huh. So the money is there. The $8,000 is already there. You're just calling it the Drought Control Program.
If I may, Your Worship, approximately $21,000 is already there, and we're calling it the Drought Control Program.
So you're asking for the $8,000 additionally. So I'm not sure why it doesn't just say that then.
I guess we need the money for the extra program. So it's a total of $30,000. Okay. Any further questions on drought management? Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any further questions? All those in favor? Thank you. The next item, demolition on McVickers. I recall an extensive conversation we had at the last meeting. Do you want to talk to me? I'm sorry. Okay. So on the McVickers, and then we'll go to the audience. On the McVickers street thing, I believe I heard you say, Mr. Squire, that there's asbestos in this building. It's not rehabilitatable. It's not sellable in the condition that it's in. That's why we're going for demolition.
That's correct, Your Worship. We would have to get rid of the asbestos if we wanted to sell the building or the property with the building on it also.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I see it as a waste of money to take this down when we had an offer a couple of years ago on this building, and we turned it down thinking we might be able to do better. But the property as it stands might be available to be used by some people that had interest before. And so I think it's a waste of money to spend $40,000 and we end up just with an empty lot. So I think we could certainly eliminate that from the budget.
Councillor Salter and then Councillor Powell.
And I would echo Councillor Greer, and I'd also like to add, it's actually 70 because it's 40 and then 30 for the Shelley Road property later. And my thoughts are that, we move very old buildings all the time. There's companies out there that do that. That's what they do for a living. And they sell them, they relocate them. They do take these houses apart. If we really are about a green community and recycling, then we can sell the wood, we can sell the doorknobs. Demax up the road, that's exactly what they do, is sell recycled building materials. If we really want to present ourselves as a city that encourages recycling, then we should be doing that. And I don't think paying $70,000 to take these buildings down makes any sense at all. We again should be looking at being fiscally responsible with taxpayers' money.
Councillor Powell.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if Councillor Greer or Councillor Salter heard the word asbestos in the report. We cannot tear down the building, or we can't sell the building knowing that it contains asbestos. We'll be liable for that. So it needs to be torn down, and it costs $40,000 because when you tear down a building with asbestos in it, there's certain measures you have to take to keep people safe. So, no.
Councillor Oates.
What current liabilities does 183 McVickers Street present to us?
Current liabilities, who wants to answer that, Mr. Manson or Mr. Squire?
I can start, Your Worship. Right now, in essence, it's a derelict building. It has not been used for 2 or 3 years. There has been no heat, no maintenance of any kind in that building. It is literally a hazard. We do have, I guess, the possibility of somebody, unbeknownst to us, getting in there, doing something and or getting hurt in that building, even though it is boarded up. I guess the other part with this is, yes, we could sell the property with the building intact on it, but whoever was to acquire that property would then be faced with the tasks of removing it, and they would bid accordingly. So if it's removed, we've got a clean piece of property to sell. If it's still there, then somebody has a liability that they would have to deal with and would bid on the property accordingly.
Further comments, Councillor Greer?
Thank you, Your Worship. We did have a couple of offers. I think before we were to tear it down, I think we should go back to those offers, which were made maybe about 3 years ago. They might still be interested. I would like to investigate that before we spend $40,000 and tear it down, because they were willing to take it as is.
Councillor Salter.
Actually, I would like to echo that, but I would also like to say both buildings, like have both of them, take a look at both of them, and also do a little more research and find out whether or not these buildings can be moved, even though they have asbestos in them, because I know those buildings are being moved. I mean, these old 1960s, 1970s houses are being moved up and down the Island Highway all the time. We know that the companies that have them, and we see them sitting on the side of the road. This isn't new. It's happening all the time. So maybe we could look further into that to see what the options are before we just agree to drop $70,000 when we don't have to.
It's 40,000. Did you say 70,000?
I say 70 because there's two. Mr. Mayor, because there are two houses that there's two houses.
But the budget calls for 40,000.
Well, there's 40,000 for McVickers and there's 30 for the Shelley Road property. And so what I'm saying is let's combine them, do that work, do the research, find out now, and if they can be moved, then just let's move them both and get it over with, rather than dragging it out waiting for the Shelley Road property one. That's all.
Councillor Beal.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the proposal for the Shelley Road property is for 2020. It's quite a long way, so that is being used quite a bit, and I imagine will be used for a number of years ahead, and I think there's time to leave that for later.
Please have a motion on what we're going to do with this McVicker Street property. Does somebody want to make a motion? Councillor Salter.
I would like to make a motion that we look further into whether or not this property can be moved and whether or not this property can be sold before agreeing to break it down for $40,000.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Greer, any further comments or?
How much is that going to cost us to investigate that?
Can anybody on staff answer that question?
If I may, Your Worship, it could be as simple as placing an ad requesting for proposals for the relocation of 183 McVickers and see if we get any takers.
Any further comments? Councillor Powell.
How long would that take?
As long as it would take us to put in an ad and get a reasonable time for people to respond back, a couple months.
Further comments? I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, at this point in time, we're going to stop, and I want to thank those members of the audience that have come for the budget hearing tonight. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being so patient. What's been passed is not irrevocable. If you have some of those items that you were thinking about discussing, please come to the microphone. Identify your name and address, and we'll go from there. And thanks again for waiting. Thanks for being patient, and thanks for coming.
Al Pastors, 211 Lodgepole Drive. It was quite interesting, actually, listening to you folks, how you guys get tied up in one or two things when there's like 50 things going on. But as you say, you have lots of time. You've got a lot till May, right? Couple of things. How many accounting staff are there right now? How much overtime is being used? And what is that costing? I'm trying to get to making up for the part-time accountant at 29.3.
Mr. Butterworth, do you have the answer to that question?
Currently in the accounting department, we have 4 clerical, 1 accountant, 1 manager, and 1 director. We use the casual staff for tax time and utility time because one person cannot run the front on their own during those busy peak times. So we have someone in for, as a casual right now, clerical casual, to assist with that. There is virtually no overtime in the finance department.
Okay. Going on to drought management. It's kind of an interesting item that there's 21.6 being taken out of the snow and ice control budget. Does that mean that the snow and ice control budget has been undersubscribed by that much? Or did we make a mistake and put too much money into it in the past few years? Or is it a fund that all of a sudden has appeared?
Mr. Squire, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, certainly with the snow and ice, historically we've, I believe the budget's about $120,000 a year for snow and ice control. Year by year, it differs. One year we maybe go over. I believe the last snowfall event, we went over $120,000, which was 4 years ago. Since then, I believe we do have reserves if we do go over that budget to pull from for a snowfall event. But on average, I took a look at the average over our last 5 years and saw a reduction of $20,000 that could be used on average. So again, it's speculative. It's up to Mother Nature what she wants to do.
Yeah, but no, I mean you're moving money from one area to another, and you're identifying it as being a $30,000 item. In point of fact, if you use budget principles, I mean that should be just an $8,000 item rather than a $30,000, or at least right underneath it have an item showing the reduction in the other budget. Because you're not going to be asking for $30,000 more. What you're asking for is $8,000 more, right?
Yes, through your worship. What we're not showing on that page is the actual budget reductions.
If you're getting folks here to agree to increase the budget. This is what this is, okay? To have a budget sitting there for 30. These are items that don't exist right now. So you want $30,000 for drought management. If you can have that, then show the reduction of where the money is coming from. You're only asking for $8,000. You're not asking for 30, or are you asking for 30? In which case, where's the other 21 going? You're asking for 30.
Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, as I explained in the earlier discussion amongst Council, this is an increase of $8,000 over the budget. So in effect, yes, we could have shown the reduction in the other area. This is a cost center, though, for $30,000. So it is a budget item that hasn't been in the budget in the past. What wasn't shown was the reduction in the snow and ice control of the $21,000.
So your total operating request isn't for $364.20, right? It doesn't show that here, folks. Let's get it right. Okay. Can we talk about the LED street light replacement that's up there for $22,000? Or is that's next time? Okay.
You can talk about it now if you'd like.
I just got a note from Councillor Beal. or your chair, it's okay to talk about it?
Go ahead.
I just have a question, or comment, if you will, about the LED lighting, and that is that we all know that LED lighting really, really drops your use of electricity dramatically, very dramatically. And along with that comes some questions. What is the expected longevity of the street lights in Parksville now, using the lighting that we have? Because we know that LED lighting is probably for like eons almost. How many street lights are there? What price could we get to change all the lighting in Parksville to LED lighting? Instead of piecemeal, change the whole works, because your electricity bill is going to drop like a stone in water.
Mr. Manson.
If you may, Your Worship, that is something that we look at. There is a significant cost to change everything to LED immediately. We also have, an expected life of the remaining street lights. What this amount does is allow us, as the existing street lights get to their end of their operational lifetime, they will be switched over into LED.
You have to admit that LED lights are much more expensive than what's
Not if you buy a whole bunch at one time. If you go out and you buy one bulb, it'll cost you $19. If you go out and you buy 3,000, you're not going to get them for $19. You're going to get them for a lot less. Okay. The replacement of the pavers, I heard the story on that, both previous meeting and this one. And I agree that, sure, they need replacing. Can they not be redirected to the parks or some other area? I mean, don't throw them out. It's concrete. You've paid for it already. Somebody made a mistake, so let's fix it. Oh, gosh, I got pages of this stuff. We won't go into the capital things. That'll be for next time. Can we talk about the water? See, I've got it by this page, so unfortunately, my questions are about this. The water fountain conversion here in the front, you got $15,000 for it. That's an awful lot of money to basically take some soil, drop it in there, cut off the water, and plant a yucca plant.
I believe there's an yucca. I believe there's an intention though with the. Somebody want to tell me about the? I'm glad you brought it up because those are the three items.
I mean, I could do it for you for. You want to pay me $15,000? I'll do it for $10,000, and you'll have a nice yucca plant there.
But what are we doing with that? I gather we're turning that into a rain garden. Is that what the intention is?
Again, it's just a budget line item. If it comes under, it definitely will come under. But we're looking at different options to repurpose it into a rain garden, into a xeriscaping, or it can be used for public art. Those are the three options.
Wow, $15,000.
Again, it's a budget item. If it comes, it's definitely will come under that.
Okay. The Class 3 driver's licensing for the fire department. I recognize that they need a Class 3 driver's license. $9,800. How many people is that for?
Somebody in the fire department can answer that?
Your Worship, that will cover 15 to 20 people for the year, and we'll be going over a couple years. Right now, when we replace our current aerial device, it will be a tandem axle, so we're required to have the Class 3. So it's something that will be used to cover off the cost of upgrading our volunteers so they can operate the apparatus.
So my question was, how the $9,800, yes, you're going to have that over a number of years, but we're talking about $9,800 for the year 2016. So how many people is that for? Because I went online and I checked that these courses are available in Vancouver for $1,600 per course, per person.
I heard 15 to 20 people. That's what I heard at the answer.
I heard
We're
15 to
gonna be
20
doing-
people over the next few years.
Yeah, we're going to be doing over the next few years, and it's going to be, a lot of it we're going to be doing in-house and bringing in a company to do the finals so we can get the members prepared for taking the road test and that.
Again, okay, obviously we're not going to get an answer there. Okay, I guess that's it for this time around. When we'll get to the capital stuff, that's fun stuff.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for waiting. Really appreciate it, Mr. Pastors. Is there anyone else in the audience that has any questions regarding the budget? Okay, members of council, what I'd like to do to finish off the evening, if you are in agreement, is go back to page 7. And we've talked about it with Mr. Pastors. We've got the fountain conversion, the LED streetlight replacement, and the stream and foreshore maintenance. So let's start off with fountain conversion. Do we need a further? Mr. Squire just explained what the options were that they were looking at in terms of what to do with the fountain, and this is just an estimate. If it comes in at $10,000 or $8,000, it'll be awarded on that basis. Any further information you can shed on this, Mr. Squire?
Yeah, that's correct. There's the 3 options that we're looking at repurposing it. There's also the under drain infrastructure we'd have to obviously remove and rehabilitate as well.
What's the cost to operating it now? Do we know?
It's subject to continuous vandalism. We charge it through the normal building, but operating it's just the electrical pump. But when it gets vandalized, obviously we're in there, we're scrubbing it out and draining it and refilling it. Hard to put numbers to that, but it's numerous accounts over the year.
The vandalism amounts to soap, from what I can remember. Yeah. Councillor Salter.
So I don't know why we besides people, I guess, putting soap in the fountain, besides that, is there something wrong with the fountain? Is it not working anymore? Does it need to be repaired? Or are you just not wanting a fountain there anymore? What's the purpose?
Just ongoing maintenance. This is a one-time cost. Over the lifetime of it, it's probably succeeded that amount. Also, the optics of water being used as a sort of fountain, a continuous. Most people don't know it's actually being pumped and recycled and recirculated. The original plan for the building was to reuse it and take the rain roof leaders, the rain from the roof, and put it into the fountain itself and then into the drain. So there's another option where we could look at as well, just to show it and showcase it as more of it could be an above-ground cistern used for re-irrigation as well.
Follow up?
Just to follow up, so there's nothing wrong with the fountain. It's working fine. Sometimes people put soap in it, but otherwise everything's fine with the fountain. I don't think I can support this.
Pardon me?
I don't think I can support refurbishing this into something public art or rain garden or whatever when there's nothing wrong with it. It's not broken.
Thank you. Any further comments from members of council?
Are we going to?
You have one, a surprise?
No, I can't support it either. If it's just to beautify it, or if it's working fine now, I think it is fine with me. I've had several actually emails on this particular, on many things, but on this particular thing, and one person said, you know, with the city hall and the way it is and with the fountain, we're not going to win any beauty pageant regardless of what we do. So anyways, I think it's an unnecessary expenditure.
Any comments from other members of council regarding the PCTC fountain conversion? Does anybody want to, go ahead.
So
So what's new is that I also received an email from, well, actually I've received several, but I brought this email that is speaks to the fountain, and they're saying from the outside the fountain appears fine. Why do we need to spend $15,000 on cosmetics for City Hall? This is coming from a taxpayer, so and I've had several of these. So because of that, and because I'm here to represent the taxpayers, I can't support this. Thank you.
Okay. Any further motions or comments rather from council? If not, I'm going to ask somebody to make a motion. What's your motion, Councillor Greer?
I'll make a motion that we do not go along with this $15,000. That we don't carry out the fountain conversion.
Do I have a seconder? Lives for another day. Okay. LED streetlight replacement. Mr. Manson, you talked about that. When Mr. Pastors brought it up, and you also talked about it, I believe, at the last budget meeting. This is a replacement program that's going to go on as the existing lights fade out and burn out. Any comments? Any questions on this particular item from members of council? Okay, I need a motion to go with the street light replacement. Moved by Councillor Rhodes, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Beale.
I'm just curious, are we receiving any grants from BC Hydro or others to facilitate this changeover? Or is this the full cost of the work?
Who can answer that?
Through your worship, this is the full cost with no grants. There's currently no grants right now through BC.
Councillor Beale.
And is it possible that there may be some grants out there to help with this?
Mr. Mason?
In
other words, if we started the program and
if I may, Your Worship, if grants become available, we'll definitely apply for them.
Councillor Rhodes.
This is for replacement of existing street lights that are no longer serviceable, correct?
That is through your worship to Councillor Oates, that is the intent. As streetlights reach the end of their useful life, they will be replaced with LED lights.
Do you have another question? All right. Okay, all those in favor of the LED streetlight replacement? Thank you, that is carried. And the item on the bottom of the page for $40,000 is a stream and foreshore maintenance, which I gather has got to do with the berm that's there now. So, Mr. Squire, are you going to talk to this?
Yes, certainly, Your Worship. With a community of our size that is on the east side is governed by the foreshore, it's becoming increasingly, again, it's not a budget that we currently have available to use. With some of the downsizing of DFO and the Coast Guard, it's been, some of this has been devolved into the city taking action on erosion control. We've now inherited a walkway. We do have maintenance on the walkway, but obviously on the foreshore we need to start maintaining areas. We have additional access points onto it, stairs onto the beach that we need to start maintaining. Things with the drainage, we haven't been operating or looking after the maintenance of some of our drainage outfalls. This would allow us to do that. Every time you go onto a foreshore, you're required to have, with the new regulations, you have to have special permits through both the province and DFO, depending on exactly the type of work that you're doing. The province, there's certain Section 9 and Section 7 that are warranted, depending if you're actually in a fish stream. So those permits cost time. You have to get a professional biologist involved. We don't have anything to charge to in operations other than the function that we're trying to do. usually it's charged to the community park, the general community park fund, or storm drainage if we're working on a storm drain. This would again be a separate budget which would allow us to do any works that we're doing on the stream and foreshore, in-stream work, to charge it to. We're also working with other community efforts, which is one of them is the Mid-Island Habitat Enhancement Society, and working with them to restore some of the streams in Shelley Creek, Carey Creek, and areas within the city to do that. Again, this would give us a budget, an operating budget, to work with those other partners on projects like that.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Squire? Councillor Salter.
I have trouble with this. And the reason why is because it does, you're right, that walkway is in the park, and that's part of the park budget. And so the same with the drainage. That's all part of the, the system drainage budget. So now we're adding a new thing in the budget here. It's like the last one that we came up with, Drought Management. Now we've got Foreshore Maintenance. I mean, that's $40,000. I can't support this because, number one, you're working with Mid-Island Habitat. They're volunteers. You're not paying them. There's no money going to pay them. Number two, there's money in the park budget for the park maintenance. There's money in storm drainage budget for storm drainage maintenance. Of course, DFO will come in when there's a fish-bearing stream, and that's not only in the park. That's all over this city, wherever you are, wherever you're working in a creek, wherever you're working in a river, where there are fish, there's DFO. We all know that. Full stop. We don't pay extra money because they're showing up to see whether or not we're killing the fish or disturbing the reds. So that's that. So, and then as far as the berms go, I recall this city working on that whole berm down in the park years ago, putting rocks down there to protect that berm, and the fallout from that didn't go well. So I just, if this is to actually stop the sand from receding, $40,000 isn't going to do it. So I can't support this. I don't really know I don't see where we need the money for this, and I'm not liking that I'm seeing something that doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you. Mr. Squire, do you want to make any comments before I? No? Thank you. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. I certainly support efforts to rehabilitate wetlands and preserve wetlands. A comment responding to Councillor Salter, I agree that the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society, the work is done by volunteers, but I happen to know that, for instance, the most recent work that was done on Shelley Creek to rehabilitate the stream side involved the planting of 1,000 plants. I believe that's the correct number. It was quite a large amount that were purchased from nurseries. So although a lot of the work is done by volunteers, I do appreciate that biologists may need to be brought in and that there are other costs. I would be curious to know if, again, this $40,000 is more or less an allowance for an amount of money, and that in fact on a given year it may come in as less than that, and I wonder if we could know about that.
Okay, any further comments from members of council? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Worship. What is the cost that we have now for on the berm that we have to keep replenishing, bringing it back up to par, because it does deteriorate every year? Do we spend, how much do we spend on that a year?
It's hard to account for because there's no specific line item budget that we can charge our resources to. So it's just absorbed by right now as a community park.
Yeah. So there always has been enough money to do it in the park budget.
Well, it would just inflate the other budgets accordingly that we would have to use to charge our time to.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, first time Councillor Oates, and then back to Councillor Salter.
Is there a connection between this initiative and the one that came before us and we approved, I think, last year with the big logs and that sort of thing? Vaughn is shaking his head. No, it's different.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, I believe you're referring to the Arbutus Point work, and that is a capital expenditure where we're basically putting in capital works or material there to address an erosion problem. The maintenance of that, I guess, would be possibly what some of this might cover on the ongoing maintenance of that. But that's a different thing.
Councillor Salter.
So with regard to the streams that we were talking about, DFO manage the streams. They do it. They use stream keepers, but they have a budget. The feds have a budget for managing those streams and ensuring that the streams are healthy for the fish. That's not the city's. That's not part of the city's expense. So that's the piece with the streams that doesn't really work for me. I think though that if you come across something that you feel needs to be done in the park that's not handled by the park budget, that would be something that I would expect you to bring forward and say, look, this is going to cost us $10,000. This is why. This is the reason. I would be more than willing to look at that. But just to have a number tossed out here for $40,000 for something that's very vague for me, I cannot support it.
Okay, any further comments from members of council? Do I have a mover and a seconder for the stream and foreshore maintenance budget? Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the $40,000 allotment? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Council, I'm going to give you a choice at this point in time. We've been at this now for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I was going to suggest, it's only a suggestion, you can turn it down, that we would finish the evening with the new spending capital packages for 2016 on page 9. If that's too much, we can cancel or adjourn the meeting and pick up later on. What's your pleasure?
I'd say we adjourn.
Okay, who's first? Councillor Oates?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Back to page 7. I don't think we've dealt with all of the items on page 7.
Which ones are we missing?
The Public Works Parks laborer there was no motion that was attached to that.
It's zero. I skipped it on purpose.
Okay. So are we approving?
They get zero.
Because that would be what I think that we're establishing a position and then we'll be committing to it in the future. And while it might be absorbed in this year's existing budget, are we committing to future years? If we're not and the money is already there, then that's great.
Mr. Manson, would you help out, please?
If I may, Your Worship, as was explained to Council at the last meeting, in essence, this is a new position, but it would be funded through the Drought Management Program and the Streams and Foreshore Maintenance Program. So there's no money associated with it or over and above those two programs, but it is a new position.
Okay, so I guess I'd need a vote before we move on. I need a vote to accept that as a new position. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mr. Greer, you're worried about future costs of this position?
Yes. Is this another full-time employee? Is that what we're talking here?
If I may, Your Worship, yes, it is an additional full-time employee.
Councillor Salter.
So if I'm understanding this, the Drought Management Program and the Stream and Foreshore Maintenance together equal $70,000, which is for an FTE for an employee. Am I correct?
If I may, Your Worship, yes and no. We are looking for another full-time labor position in Public Works and in Parks. It will be funded in part through the existing budget that we already have, plus the $30,000 and the $40,000 for the drought management and the stream and foreshore maintenance programs.
So follow-up, please.
Yes, go ahead.
So if we didn't have drought management and we didn't have foreshore maintenance, we would just have the request for the FTE for the for that one parks laborer position, which would be $70,000. How much are we going to pay that person? What's the pay rate going to be for the labor?
The hourly rate right now for a laborer is somewhere in the $23 to $25 an hour rate.
Yearly, what would this person receive?
Sorry?
What would the yearly pay for this person be?
I don't have a
We've got zero
calculator.
here.
I don't have a calculator in front of me, so I'm not going to guess. It's in the, I don't know, 50 to 60,000 a year range.
60,000, leaving 10,000 left over for the stream and foreshore maintenance and the drought management. So 5,000 for each.
Not directly, Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter. We have looked at the existing parks and public works budgets and have identified the availability of funding in those. That existing funding plus these two programs will allow us to hire a full-time labor position.
So it's basically is funded. Okay.
With the addition of these two programs, yes, it is funded.
So what I think I'm seeing is two programs that have some name them whatever you like, that's going to actually pay for the labor.
Not totally, Your Worship. That plus identified funding in the rest of the budget for parks and operation will fund a full-time labor position.
So the money for the $40,000 for the stream and the foreshore maintenance and the $30,000 for the drought management are not going to be used. Neither of those dollars are going to be used for the parks labor.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that those two projects plus additional monies that are already in the budget will fund the labor position.
No new monies. Does anybody else want to, wait a minute, from staff, Mr. Butterworth, did you have a comment to make?
Yeah, we also forgot about the reduction to the snowplow budget, so it's actually only 48,000 in here because we don't have the minus up there. So for 48,000, we're funding this new employee. They're not only going to do stream and foreshore maintenance, they might not do any of it. They're going to be working wherever the manager of operations sends them to work or wherever they're needed in parks. So they're going to be charged all over the place. But they're being absorbed within the budget for the 40,000 plus the 8,000 for the drought management net of snowplow removal is 8,000. So.
Councillor Beal and then Councillor Greer. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we should have had this better explained to us to start with. I certainly am not willing to hire another person. I think we've hired enough for 1 year and for one evening.
When I saw absorbed by the budget, by the existing budget, I didn't see a problem. It's being absorbed. It's not it's a new position, but it's being funded.
Yeah.
Through the overall budget.
It's still being paid by taxpayers, and I think initially there should have just been the one entry there. However, I wouldn't support it.
Okay, so I have a mover and a seconder. Any further comments on this? I have a mover and a seconder for the parks laborer that will be absorbed by the existing budget. Do I not? I have a mover and a seconder? I thought that I don't have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Oates, Councillor Beal. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. So coming back to my original comment, it's almost that we've been at this for 2.5 hours. I want to know Council's pleasure. Do we want to look at the new spending packages capital for 2016 tonight and deal with it, or do we want to leave it for another meeting? What's the pleasure of the majority? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to leave it for another evening. I think we've done enough.
What about everybody else? Is that the feeling of everybody else? Councillor Powell?
I'd like to finish it off. Go till 9.
Okay, let's take a vote on that. How many want to stay and finish the package, and how many want to go home? How many want to stay and finish the 2016 capital package? How many want to go home? Okay, we're going home. Well, no, you didn't raise your hand. Not if you raised your hand. Not, no. There was. Okay, we're gonna end it up tonight. So can I call for an adjournment, please?
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Beal. We are adjourned, and we'll take up on page 9 at the next meeting.
Well done.